Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for a Word Balloon edition of the Big Bout Podcast. John Suntress here. Really happy to welcome back Editor-in-Chief of Ring Magazine, Dougie Fisher. Doug, great to see you, man. Welcome
Hey,
back.
great to see you. Hey,
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, man. And truly, starting off, I can't believe how great boxing has been since COVID, frankly, and in the bubble. I think it's the best sport that really responded to this. We've had our mishaps, and we've had our cancellations and postponements due to COVID, but truly great matchups and really entertaining fights.
Listen, when boxing's good, it's good. And I'm biased because I'm a boxing fan and I'm not a fan of any other sport. So I can't compare how boxing has been impacted and how as an industry internationally it's reacted to the pandemic. I can't compare that with other sports. I know what the challenges were as far as covering the sport with a magazine, a monthly magazine. That became more difficult. There's always challenges. But it became more difficult with the pandemic. But in a way, it kind of helped us out. It actually helped our sales, at least sales online, obviously not off the shelves.
Sure.
But with kind of delving into our archives and putting out special issues, on past great fighters and great fights, whether it's Gotti Ward or Manny Pacquiao or Mike Tyson or Sugar Ray Robinson.
That's awesome, man. No, I hear you. Real fast, I guess we should acknowledge, because it happened a couple of weeks, last week actually, What'd you think of the Ken Burns Ali documentary?
I've just started watching it.
Okay.
And no, listen, I'll be honest with you. Muhammad Ali was my entree into boxing. The first fight I ever watched live. I think I tweeted about this recently because I don't know, maybe it was the anniversary of this particular fight, or somebody had posted up a clip of this particular fight on Twitter. But it was Muhammad Ali versus Ernie Shavers, 1977. I was 7 years old, and it wasn't. I didn't just happen across the fight. I'm watching ABC's Wide World of Sports, and Howard Cosell interviews Muhammad Ali about his next heavyweight title defense, and it was Shavers. And Ali just went into his shtick, making fun of Shavers, and he was so charismatic and so funny to me, a child. And his interaction and his dynamic with Howard Cosell, who I knew of, everybody knew who Howard Cosell was. He was a household name. You either loved him or you hated him. And I was into him. I remember I kind of liked him. His delivery was different from other sports broadcasters. But I wasn't really familiar with his call of boxing. I think it was football,
Sure.
NFL. And I remember there was a rerun of an episode of The Odd Couple where Cosell was a guest star, and he was on there, and I was like, man, this okay. It was weird. It was meta. I'm watching a show,
Very meta.
Fictional guys, and I maybe that was my first time kind of seeing that. I mean, obviously, the 70s was a time of variety shows, so you would have guests. All kinds of special guests from other parts of the entertainment world and media.
Yeah.
But that was the first time there were, two fictional characters interacting with a real world personality and media celebrity. And I remember that. And it was, for some reason, it was one of my favorite episodes of The Odd Couple. But so anyways, I already knew who Howard Cosell was. I knew who Muhammad Ali was. I knew the name. Ali was already in history books. Like there were, we had encyclopedias, right, of previous decades, right? Like Encyclopedia Britannica of, the 40s, 50s, 60s. And if you looked in the 60s and you got to the sports area, Ali's in there. There's a picture, black and white photo of Ali jabbing the shit out of Sonny Liston. And I have no context. I'm looking at this, and he's Cassius Clay in this photo, and he's looking dynamic. And Clay, Liston, who was, we know now, we know that he was the odds favorite. He was supposed to destroy Cassius Clay. He looked pitiful to me. And it's a black and white photo, and he's getting caught with a jab. And one of his eyes are closed, and it's blood, actually. There's a cut under his eye, and it's a single droplet of blood, and it because it's a black and white photo, it looks like a tear. And I'm thinking, this guy's an asshole. I'm thinking Clay's an asshole. He's torturing this old guy, because just the body language and the body type of Liston. Liston looked flabby and listless, and Clay was dynamic, but in things that were taught in class, right? And just in books that I had, I knew about the transformation from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali to the 3 years he spent out of boxing. Like I knew about that, but I'd never seen him on live TV in the flesh doing his thing. And he was larger than life, and he was popular, and kids loved him. And by this time in the 70s, even the establishment, like even conservative old white people loved Ali. It was like, so I was ready to receive him. And I saw this interview, and it's you could probably find it on YouTube. It's a famous interview where he has a photo of Shavers, and he's making fun of Shavers being bald. And he keeps covering Shavers' face with his hand, and he calls him the acorn. It's what he looks like, an acorn. And I'm laughing, and I'm like, I got to see this fight. So it's the first time I'm going through TV Guide and looking under sports and finding boxing and finding when on Saturday or whatever day of the week it was. This title
was a weeknight. I'm pretty sure
Was it a weeknight? It's an early memory. And matter of fact, I'm not sure that I made it through the 15 rounds. I don't know. I may have, if it was at night, I may have fallen asleep.
Sure.
But I remember my father saying it was a conversation I had with my dad after I said, hey, I want to watch this fight. And he's like, okay, cool. We'll watch it together. I kind of want to see it too. Shavers is a huge puncher. And again, not much of a concept of boxers having different power, how that factors into the fight. But my dad said Ali might lose this fight. And I remember thinking like, holy shit, no way.
Right.
I'm just getting hip to this guy. Like that can't be like, and it didn't make any sense either. Like, how can that be a possibility when he's the champion and everyone loves this guy? And I haven't heard anything about Ernie Shavers. And my dad told me he should have lost the third fight to Ken Norton, which, that came and went the previous year. I didn't even know about it.
Sure.
I'm thinking like, really? He's champion, but you're saying he should have lost. There's all this stuff I don't even understand. Like, what are you saying? He's like, he's getting old. And I don't even get that. He doesn't look old to me or whatever. Right. He's getting old. Shavers can punch. I think they made a mistake doing this fight. Whatever. Yada, yada, yada. But we both kind of anticipated it, and we both watched the fight together. I know I at least watched the first couple of rounds with my dad. Maybe I lost interest and went somewhere else. Maybe I fell asleep if it was at night. If it was in the afternoon on a Saturday or one of those, I probably made it to the final bell. But I remember anticipating that fight and watching that fight. So, Ali, boxing for me started with Muhammad Ali, and Ali leads to, Sugar Ray Leonard. He had turned pro by this point. He's on his way up to the title.
Right.
And it was a fast rise. And once I started watching him, I got an understanding of what a young fighter, a prime fighter looks like and how they fight, especially of the talent level of Sugar Ray Leonard. And again, before I saw him fight, I knew who he was because he won the gold medal.
Right.
And he was like a household name. Okay.
Absolutely.
Boxing, Olympic boxing was prime time. And if you were a standout in Olympic, especially the 1976 games, your name was out there. You were reading about them. You were hearing about them. You were seeing interviews. Cosell attached himself to Leonard in a different way, but just like he was, a 1-2 punch with Ali. And through Leonard, I learned about the lighter weight classes. And Leonard, once he became champion and started having these super fights with Roberto Duran and Tommy Hearns, I got bit by the bug at a very young age. Okay, so throughout the 80s, I'm all about boxing. And really, by the end of the 80s, I'm that kind of boxing fan where I have to I have to watch everything. If there's boxing on, I don't care if I don't know who it is. I got to watch it. But certainly, I want to read every magazine that's out there. I want to read every newspaper column and article that's out there. By the 80s, my family, we're living in Springfield, Missouri. So the local sports writers weren't writing a lot about boxing.
Sure.
And sometimes, not in a flattering way. So I would go to the public library and I would find the newspapers from Las Vegas and Atlantic City and New York City and Philadelphia and Boston or wherever there was a boxing columnist or beat writer. Going into a big fight, that was my internet.
I'm with you.
I'm reading the old guard. I'm reading, Ron Borges out of Boston, George Kimball out of Boston as well. Bernard Fernandez out of Philadelphia, Wally Matthews, Phil Berger, Michael Katz out of New York City. There were others from New York City. I forget who the guy was. And there was a guy in Reno that I used to read.
Oh, I'm not sure. Of course, Jerry Eisenberg as well from Jersey and everything.
Yeah, Eisenberg was out of the Jersey papers. But so anyways, that was my internet. That was that was like the day to day, because their columns would fall on different days of the week.
Yeah.
My dad was a college professor, so I would go to the college library. Back then it was Southwest Missouri State University. Now I think it's just South Missouri State. But whatever. We'd go with my dad to to work out almost after school, almost every day. And I'd always make a stop, after we'd work out or before our workout. I'd make a stop by the library to read these newspaper columnists. But I every book, if I had the money, I would purchase it. And of course, that meant a lot of books on Ali, and a lot. I consumed any magazine, whether it's a sports magazine or not, with Muhammad Ali's picture on there. I bought it. I had to have it. I had to read it over and over again. So what I'm trying to get is, when it comes to Ken Burns, I know Ken Burns is a master documentarian and filmmaker and storyteller, and he's meticulous. And there's going to be, no stone unturned. But I've just Muhammad Ali holds no more mystique for me as far as
the story.
So many documentaries. I've just, I've watched so much. I've read so much on him. It's not like I'm in a hurry to see another, but I will. That's how I am. It's the same thing with all of the the media, particularly streaming TV series that are comic book related. I've been there. I know these characters intimately. I'll get around to it. I haven't watched Loki. I'll get around to it.
Okay.
I just started WandaVision, but I'm not on there when everybody else is on it and trying to second guess it and all that.
You can't watch everything. It's a wonderful problem to have.
Yeah.
Given our ages, I'm a little bit older than you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first Ali Frazier fight when I was a very little kid.
Holy crap!
And just because my dad was into it.
I was 1 year old.
There you go, man. It was 70 or 7. Yeah, it was 70.
71.
It was 71. Okay,
yeah.
So I was 64, December 64. So yeah, I was 5 going on 6. Yeah, and I mean, again, because it was everywhere. It was on radio, It was on TV. It was such a worldwide event. I was aware of that. I think the first fight I saw that I remember watching live was when Jimmy Young fought Ali. And Ali was so fat in that fight.
Yeah.
Jimmy Young was boxing circles around him and stuff.
I think that's one of those fights my dad said he should have lost. It wasn't just Ken Norton. I think he said Jimmy Young beat him.
For real. Yeah, man.
I have no idea who that is at the time. I'm like, what?
Sure.
How can a guy be champion of the world, a super celebrity like Ali, and you're telling me he's lost or he should have lost? And yeah.
Hilarious.
Concepts I didn't yet have. But hey, you know what? You got your enthusiasm for boxing. You've got a glass half full view of boxing in the pandemic, or hopefully towards the tail end of the pandemic.
Hopefully,
because I get my Twitter timeline, it can definitely skew negative, but also I'm getting kind of long in the tooth. I just entered my 50s.
Yep.
And I've watched a lot of boxing. I've covered a lot of boxing. I've followed a lot of boxing. I've chronicled a lot of boxing.
Yes, indeed.
And I definitely am at that stage where, I don't feel like I have to watch everything. That there's a Fox Sports card or a Showbox or whatever, and I'm kind of like, I don't feel like I have to watch it live.
That's interesting. Well, I can appreciate that. Sure.
Yeah. If there's a good fight, I hear about it. Okay. If it goes the way I think it's going to go, if it's like mismatches and it goes the way I think it's going to go, I don't, and that's for every platform too. It's not just Fox and Showtime. It'll be, DAZN. If there's some Eddie Hearn card from Italy or something, or, I'm
like today's card. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, do I need to watch that live? No. But if I hear something special happen, okay, I'm going to watch it. And it's, I appreciate when we get world-class boxing like we had with the heavyweight fight last Saturday. Maybe a fight, an upset on paper, but maybe, in retrospect, not a huge upset, given Usyk's talent. But I definitely, that's obviously a fight I'm going to watch live.
Sure.
I'm responsible for updating the website, at least with that particular event. So I was watching it intently and working at the same time, but thoroughly enjoying every round, trying to score it, really concentrating, watching it.
Yeah.
And appreciating that it was a huge event in England, and appreciating and being pleasantly surprised that the judges got it right.
No kidding, man. Yeah.
I was more, I had 9 rounds for Usyk, so I agreed with that 117-112 card. It was 117-111 on my card. So that judge had an even round in there.
Yep.
So he must have had like 8 rounds, 1 even, and then 3 rounds for Joshua, which is totally cool. But I could even see, the 115-113, which is, giving
Really?
that's giving Joshua the benefit of the doubt. But
Yeah.
I take note of like close rounds. So there was a couple rounds that were close, and I was like, no, Usyk won it. But I was thinking to myself, one of these judges are going to score these rounds for Joshua, which, one of them did.
Absolutely.
But the right guy won, and it
Yes.
was very satisfying. And then you just have that buzz. I had the buzz the rest of Saturday, all day Sunday, and most of this week, while people are now experiencing Alexander Usyk fever. They're like, he's number 1 pound for pound. He's not just one of the greatest cruiserweights ever. He's one of the greatest heavyweights ever. And he's, and they're kind of, that's just that it's part of that euphoria or whatever. But I enjoy it though.
Let's talk about the other side of that fight, and that is Anthony Joshua. I'm really interested as someone that has been covering so closely over the years, your thoughts, because especially in those first couple rounds, when Usyk was beating him to the punch and connecting so well, the look on Joshua's face was somewhere, in my perspective, either I don't know what to do with this guy, or I'm really afraid this guy can hurt me, or worse.
I think it's more, I think it was more, how do I solve this puzzle? I think Joshua is a thinker. He's very careful, and you can see that in his interviews. And he won't just grant anybody an interview. He's not like that kind of accessible people's champion. He's very carefully marketed. He's careful about what he says. He says the right things. His image is near perfect. And that's part of why he's not just a huge superstar in I'll say Europe, but definitely in the UK.
Certainly.
He's very successful. Like outside of his boxing earnings, he does very well with endorsements and that sort of thing. He's commercial in that regard.
He's a national commercial hero.
No right. But not like Muhammad Ali, where it was organic, where like at one time he was polarizing. At one time he's a pariah. At one time he's the champion of some parts of society, and he sticks around long enough and overcomes enough challenges, and also matures and mellows in certain regards to where he becomes a crossover. But it happened. Like by the time I'm 7 years old, I'm just like, this guy's just a superstar. He's
Absolutely.
Like whatever, he's like any sports star or hero at that time, whether it's Pete Rose or Evel Knievel or whatever, or Bruce Lee, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like iconic, and just iconic in part because he's a maverick, and his personality, can rub people the wrong way. But by that time, it's cool. That's just part of who he is. It's not necessarily like, well, that's his brand, you know what I mean? Like, that's what we're going for. It's not like he had a marketing team, but Joshua is that. Like, he's careful and he's thoughtful. And I'm not saying he's doing that just to be successful in terms of from a business standpoint. I'm saying he's like that, like Lennox Lewis was. You know what I mean? Like Andre Ward, right? You ask him a question, he's going to take it real serious and think about it, right? So that can work for you in the ring, and that can work against you in the ring if you're in with a brilliant boxer, like that kind of stylistic conundrum. And I think I tweeted after the second round, I tweeted, Joshua is looking at Usyk the way I used to look at a Rubik's Cube. I couldn't figure those damn things out. I never did any better than one side. I could like look at it, figure out one side, and then I'm just looking at it like, how in the hell am I going to get another side? Like, how is this even possible?
That's fantastic.
Once I try to get a second side, one color, I screw up the other side. That I'm like, and to me, he was thinking too much. And it wasn't so much he was worried about getting hurt, although what happened is he's staying on the outside and he's trying to figure this guy out. And sometime in the third round, he got hit with something that did buzz him. And so, I mean, after those first 3 rounds, you're like, okay, it's an uphill battle for Joshua. And to his credit, I do think he made enough adjustments to where he was able to land some leather. You know, if you look at the face of Usyk, he had the cut and he had 2 cuts under both eyes. And, and that was from a few jabs and a few right hands, but he wasn't committing to his power. He wasn't trying to lay him out. He was just trying to touch him. And I think, you know, he and his team maybe made this mistake of just thinking like, we don't have to put power behind it. We're the bigger man, and it'll just tell over the rounds. Your natural size, Anthony, is going to tell over 12 rounds, and you'll wear him out and stop him late, you know, or you'll hurt him. You'll drop him at some point. And that never happened because A, he didn't figure out the style. B, Usyk is tougher than I think Team Joshua anticipated, maybe tougher than most of us anticipated, because I was one of those geniuses that picked Joshua on points. And I thought it would be a difficult fight. But I did think the difference would be Joshua's size. And here's where I screwed up. I think I wasn't looking at Usyk, the totality of his career, including his amateur career. I should have been looking at his amateur career. But I wasn't looking at his cruiserweight run. I was looking at his 2 fights at heavyweight.
Sure.
And being a prisoner of the moment.
Yes.
And thinking you weren't as active as you should have been. This is what I'm thinking about Usyk. You should have had more heavyweight fights under your belt, okay, going into this fight. You didn't look that great against Chaz Witherspoon, okay, who's like not even a gatekeeper, you know, at this point. Just a guy, right?
Right.
He's a former prospect who didn't pan out, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Right, that's just being honest. And then with Chisora at this stage of Chisora's career, Derek Chisora is a gatekeeper. And if you don't beat Derek Chisora, it means you're not really world class. Now,
Agreed.
Usyk beat him on points, but it's not like he crashed the gate. He didn't bust through the gate.
That's
he
right.
Just kind of opened the door and walked through after some difficult early rounds. So
right. Chisora was competitive. Absolutely.
So that's what I'm thinking, like, which is again thinking too much. See, I'm honestly, I really think that Joshua, if he has the ability to turn his brain off and not play chess, because he's not a chess player compared to Usyk. He's a checkers player.
Sure.
And Usyk is a grandmaster, like Lomachenko.
Absolutely.
Okay? He's like a chess grandmaster, right? You don't want to play chess with the grandmaster. You want to be a savage. You know what I mean? You want to knock the board off. You want to say, fuck chess.
Sure.
Bloody knuckles. You know, let's wrestle. Let's be physical, right? If he can't turn that off, if he can't turn his mind off, it's going to be hard for him to beat Usyk in a rematch. It really is. You can make more adjustments. And like I said, I thought he did. He started to walk him down, tapped him to the body a little bit. You know, maybe all he needs to do is just more of that. Maybe, you know, he knows what to expect now and he can have a better game plan. But I almost feel like you don't want to be thinking game plan. You don't want to be thinking too much about tactics and strategy. You want to be thinking about punishment. You know, how can I make this physical on this cat?
Well, and physical is the key. It's I mean, it's everything that Fury does well, leaning on a guy, wearing him down.
Yeah, Fury does that. He knows how to be the big man. And that's part of his neutralizing tactics.
Yes.
And he's done that against smaller guys.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to get a question in from Israel, who asks a good question. would a Ken Burns documentary series on Tyson pique your
Yes.
interest more than the
Yes.
upcoming Ali?
Yes, it would, because I don't think I've read about any human being as much as I have Muhammad Ali.
I'm with you.
You know, I mean, and it's kind of sad, you know, like Ali has been examined so much. You know, you can get a bright talent like Will Smith, and you know, a talented filmmaker producer like was it Michael Mann?
Michael Mann,
the Ali film. What was that? Whatever, 20 years ago or 20 something years. It was late 90s or the start of the 2000s.
Early 2000s, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, right? And you watch that movie, and it's just like, I know this. We know all this. You know, you're reenacting. You're just doing reenactments of stuff we've seen in in Ali's film library or in documentaries, or you know, it's like
million documentaries.
And it can't. It just it should have been an exciting movie, but it can't be, because this guy was like just like a once in a lifetime transcendent personality, sports person, celebrity. If you want to call him an activist, go there. Whatever.
Yeah.
He was a transcendent human being, right? Like,
that's kind of the point of the Burns. That's kind of the point of the Burns documentary.
Yeah,
they cover his fight career very well, but they really do honor the fact that he transcended boxing and became the world figure that he was.
I will watch it though. I will, because I know that was a process. It's a process, and I know, and I like the way Ken Burns does filmmaking. So
yeah,
you know, and I know there's a lot of Ring Archive stuff in there too. So you know,
there you go.
I kept getting emails, you know, with I think it's Florentine Films is his film company.
Yeah.
Asking about, you know, do you guys have these photos in Getty, and we'll need these magazine covers, and I'm like, yeah,
awesome, yeah,
we
that's
money with that. Yeah, but no, to answer that question, absolutely, something on Mike Tyson. I would definitely be. You know, and I followed Tyson as a fan, and Leighton Tyson's career as a boxing reporter, a young boxing reporter. Those were the first major fights that I went to, were Mike Tyson fights in Vegas, and those were and his career is interesting, because you can break it up in these, like, you know, 3-year spots, you know, to where his pro debut and very quick rise to prominence and popularity, where it's like the fairy tale, you know, Customato and the Kid, and you know, and everyone loved him because of that voice, and he was very humble in interviews back then, but a sharp mind, obviously, and a boxing historian. To, by the end of the decade, like, such a difference from like 1986, 87 to like 88 and 89. Suddenly he's kind of a bad boy. There's the law run-ins, and you know, he's like a bona fide celebrity, but he's got this bad boy part, and everyone's he's gonna burn out, and this and that. The fall from grace, the rape conviction, the jail term, the coming back in the 90s, the regaining the title, but in the 90s he's like an anti-hero, and by the end of that decade he's still fighting, and it's totally clear that he's miserable and he hates it, but it's what he does, and he means so much money for so many people. It's like, you know, and by that point he's also kind of addicted to that lifestyle, where it's just like, there's a lot, and nobody's better about analyzing Tyson than Tyson himself. And he's reached this point of maturity where he can kind of look back on his life and with a degree of detachment, you know.
Absolutely.
And definitely he always had the honesty. He's brutally honest. But I think he can talk about it without being bitter, being pissed off. Like, interviews from 15 years ago, they were like that. He was just sick with bitterness and resentment, you know.
Well, again, he experienced at first the positive things of fame,
and
then the over scrutinizing during his marriage to Robin Givens, the Barbara Walters interview, all that stuff, where he became tabloid Mike Tyson rather than athlete Mike Tyson.
But he was fascinating from day one. Something about him. It was definitely his style. it was the way he talked, his interviews, his love for history, boxing
Yes.
history, but like world history. And he would talk about it. Yeah, he would fuck it up. He would mess it up or whatever. But mythology and all, he would, But yeah, he was different. He was different. He was different, charismatic in his own way, and photogenic in his own way.
100%.
He's not like a GQ model, but the dude never took a bad photo out of the ring or in the ring.
Hey man, I had, prior to the rape accusation and the trial and everything, in college, I had a Mike Tyson poster on my dorm room wall. Absolutely.
Sure. I
And
did
yeah.
the same thing.
And it was my college years where he was climbing through the ranks and just knocking out the Sammy Scaffs and some of these other lesser heavyweights as he was, piling up the wins, leading to Trevor Burbick and
my college years is 88 to 92, right? So late 80s, early 90s. And he's fallen from grace. He's no longer the champion. And George Foreman is coming up and finally fighting like contenders and looking like maybe he's for real or whatever. So there was a Ring magazine with an illustration, and I think they called it whatever, the $100 million fight or whatever. And it's an illustration of Mike Tyson and old, big, fat, bald George Foreman. And I loved it. And I was so into this potential fight. Like, I was like, that was my dream bout. And I used to love to piss off the Tyson fanatics and saying, Foreman's going to bounce his ass around the canvas like he did Joe Frazier, And I said that half joking, but I was also saying, like, no, it actually might happen. like I was thinking that, like George is big enough and sturdy enough and wily enough and experienced enough, and also in just a better place as a man, as a human being. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And was at that time.
Yes.
Maybe he does. Maybe he does beat him. I wanted to see that so bad.
Two stories to that. First of all, when Foreman fought Dwight Muhammad Cowie, they wanted any kind of publicity. And even me in Bloomington, Illinois, managed to get George and Bert, and Michael Nunn was on the card, and I got to interview all of them. And I'm like, George, don't you need to fight? I mean, no disrespect to Cowie, but obviously more of a cruiserweight and a light heavy than a legitimate heavyweight. And I'm like, don't you need to fight better fighters? He's like, all I need is activity. I'll get my timing back, and believe me, just make the fight and watch me. Then I got to meet Ali before the Holyfield fight at a Fred Burns Indiana card in South Bend, Indiana. It was a Harold Brazier fight on a ESPN top ranked card.
I forgot that Brazier's from Indiana. Yeah,
loved Harold. Harold was amazing.
Great guy.
By this time, I was writing for Bert Sugar at Boxing Illustrated.
Yeah.
And I got to interview Ali. And Ali was great because, as you know, his mind was still sharp, even with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, George has a great shot here. And he goes, I know I'm another old man saying this.
Yeah.
But he's like, George is a totally different fighter than he was in the 70s. He's like, he takes his time. He's looking for his openings.
Right.
And he's much more patient. And he goes, I'm not going to say he's going to win, but it wouldn't surprise me if George really gives a good account of himself against Holyfield. We all know what happened.
Yeah.
And also subsequently winning the title for more and everything.
That fight made fans, because George appealed to a huge segment. George appealed to the Midwest. George appealed to casual fans because they remembered him, and now he's this big cuddly teddy bear, and it didn't hurt that he was a Christian. You know what I mean?
You're right.
But he had that humility. You know what I mean? And he was just engaging, funny,
and he was a mountain. I mean, Holyfield's just working his ass off, and Foreman's still there. And just it was like an aircraft carrier just slowly moving forward.
Yeah, and he's like a glacier. Yeah. That would be an interesting documentary as well. And focusing on that comeback, because it was incredible. But that pay-per-view, a college professor of mine, he just recently passed away, as a matter of fact. He was somebody who was a boxing fan like in the 60s and 70s, and not as hardcore by that point, which I think it was 1991.
That's right.
he ordered the fight, and we couldn't believe, like, at first he just, invited people he knew were into boxing, and I was one of them, right? This is Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, small liberal arts college, not a lot of sports fans, period, let alone boxing, right? So I'm thinking it's going to be like my professor and like 2 or 3 other people. But by the time the opening bell for the main event, the heavyweight championship, man, that his living room was full. I mean, like Foreman had struck a chord, and people were rooting for him.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, as entertaining and likable as Evander Holyfield was. But
Absolutely.
that was something else. Yeah, there's a lot of really amazing documentaries that could be done. And I definitely think, matter of fact, isn't there something? I saw a commercial for something regarding Mike Tyson on one of the major networks, as a matter of fact.
Well, I know they did that ABC look
Yeah.
at Tyson back in the summer.
I think there's something else. There's like a follow-up or something.
Could be.
I saw an advertisement for it, and I'm like, Tyson still resonates.
Oh, of course.
But he's reached that stage that Ali was in the late 70s and that Foreman was in the late 80s and early 90s. Where he's had that fall from grace or whatever. Man, with Tyson, he's long retired or whatever, but it's like all is forgiven,
Yeah. Do you think we're so far removed from that last period in the 90s when boxing still mattered to the mainstream? Do you think we could, as an American audience, recapture that, or has the ship left and we're where we are?
The ship's gone. I'm not saying it can't come back, but the structure of the industry right now has to be sort of broken and reset because it's dysfunctional. It's
massively. Please.
Yeah, we can't capture the attention of the mainstream. We can't get a star like a Mike Tyson or an Oscar De La Hoya, if you will, because the way it is currently, the fighters, they can't fight enough. They don't fight enough. They can't, even if they want to, they can't fight enough, and they can't fight the right opponents because it's so fractured, particularly here in the United States. There's just these factions and it's because whereas in the past, a network that was interested in boxing was not exclusive to any one promotional company. And they would basically, it was this way with the networks, right? It was like there's ABC, NBC, CBS.
Right.
They have their sports programs and they have their boxing programs and their boxing people that they trust to go out and find the right fights, And sometimes they actually were boxing people, like Ray Arcel did this and
Morty Sharnick.
Yeah, right. And maybe even Gil Clancy. I mean, he was former trainer and he did commentary, but I think he also was like sort of like a network matchmaker or like the guy who would look at a matchup and say, yeah, that's TV friendly.
Alex Wallow at ABC.
Alex Wallow, right, exactly. He was like the boxing geek. He was like me. You know what I mean? He's like a journalist, turned, broadcaster, turned network executive, but he knew, like, he was the guy who had, the magazine, stack of magazines, and he knew who was who, right? So, but so the networks, and then later HBO and Showtime, promoters would come to them with fights, and they're like, okay, that's worth our licensing fee. That's worth airing live. That's worth putting some marketing muscle behind. Or this fighter you got, we could tell this Oscar De La Hoya cat, Bob is going to be a star. You're telling us he's going to be a star, and we can see it. So yeah, we're going to get behind him, Or with Don King, we're like, oh, Don, this Mexican Julio Cesar Chavez. Oh my God, the ratings we get whenever he's welcome back anytime. Or Felix Trinidad. Wow, the Puerto Ricans are going crazy for this guy, and he's dynamic and all that. So occasionally they would get behind a particular fighter. HBO getting behind Roy Jones Jr. Right? People felt sorry for him coming out of the 1988 Olympics. Like, oh, this kid should have been the Olympic champ, should have been a gold medalist. and then they see him as a pro and they're like, oh my God, what kind of athleticism? Like, what kind of a talent are we looking at here, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, HBO is going to get, well, you know what, Roy? Don't fight on network television. We want you on HBO, and we're going to pay you a lot more than they can pay you. So get with us, But for the most part, they were open for business, whether it was main events, Top Rank, Don King.
Yeah, Cedric Kushner.
Cedric Kushner, right, sure. And so when the promoters needed to work together and it was worth it for them, they would build up their own stars on their own with, main events with Fernando Vargas, Don King with Felix Trinidad, Top Rank with Oscar De La Hoya. Okay. Cedric Kushner with Shane Mosley. Okay. Right. They're all building their guy up and putting him in tough. And when it made sense to do a co-promotion, because it made business, they did it. And the network bankrolled it, right? Now what we have is a promoter has an exclusive alignment with the network. And so all of that promoter's talent has to fight on that network, unless it's kind of like a small fish or whatever, or a situation where it's like a purse bid kind of thing with sanctioning body titles. And so that's what's happening. And so you can't get an Oscar De La Hoya. I'm not saying that there isn't an Oscar De La Hoya personality out there or an Oscar De La Hoya talent, but I'm surrounded by boxing books and boxing magazines, and I've got a Ring magazine here. This is from September 1995. I think it says Bonafide Superstar. Oscar is the boxer for the 90s, right? And you see,
I probably bought that magazine.
Bob Arum behind there, and there's Oscar.
Yep.
And at this point, Oscar's 18-0, and he's Ring Magazine's #1 rated lightweight. And he's halfway through a year where he's going to be, at the end of the year, he's going to be Ring Magazine's Fighter of the Year, because he fought 4 times, and everybody he fought was a real guy. It was John Molina. You remember him, right?
Oh yeah.
And it was Rafael Reyes, and that was a title unification bout. And it was Gennaro Hernandez. May he rest in peace. Hall of Fame worthy boxer.
I didn't know he passed away. Wow. Okay.
Oh, he passed away years ago. He died of cancer, maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, that's it, man.
Yeah, Chicanito. And he was undefeated. And then at the end of the year, it was Jesse James Leija.
Oh, sure.
They were all like veterans, like battle-tested veterans, and been at the best. If they weren't undefeated, they had only lost to great fighters like Azuma Nelson or, Tony the Tiger Lopez or whatever. They were real guys, right?
Yes.
And Oscar beat them all. And so, he's Fighter of the Year. Listen, he didn't turn pro until late 1992. So basically he had 2 years, 1993 and 1994, where he's on the development, right? He's fighting guys he's supposed to be, they're stepping it up incrementally. But by the time it was, at the start of 1995, it's like, okay, the training wheels are off. You're going to fight some real guys. And of course, HBO was happy to pay a nice, healthy licensing fee because they want to get behind this future superstar. Now, when I look at the rankings a year later, he conquered lightweight. He goes up to junior welterweight.
140,
and of course, the fight to make, can you see? I mean, Mike Tyson's still a superstar. And here's Tyson regaining the title against Frank Bruno.
Sure. Yeah. I was at that fight.
Up here, it's Oscar and Julio Cesar Chavez, who had the WBC junior welterweight title. I think his record at this time is 96-1-1. Now, he's past his prime, okay? But he's still a champion.
Right.
Well, and more importantly, he's an icon. He's a living legend, right? And so that's the fight to be made. And when I go to the rankings, let me see if I can find the rankings. When I go to the rankings, I think Oscar, after one fight at 140, was like, Oscar is, here he is. Oscar's number 4 at 140, and Julio Cesar Chavez is number 3
at
140. Number 1 is my man Kostya Tszyu. That's a fight I would have loved to see. Oscar.
Oh, my God. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But Vince Phillips kind of spoiled that, so it didn't happen. I can't blame Oscar for that.
Who was number 2?
Frankie Randall.
Oh, of course, the surgeon
Frankie.
who was playing footsie with Chavez, handing back and forth the title. Sure.
Right. So
who just passed away?
He just passed away. Yeah, rest in peace to the surgeon, man.
Absolutely,
so Oscar,
I was at one of those fights.
Oscar was number 1 at lightweight. He has one fight at junior welterweight, and then he goes for the icon, right? Super fight at junior welterweight. I'm looking ahead to welterweight. Number 1 is Pernell Whitaker. Number 2 is Felix Trinidad. Number 3 is Ike Quartey. Number 4 is Obakar. When I look at the pound for pound, Pernell Whitaker's number 1 pound for pound. Felix Trinidad is number 4 pound for pound. Now, by the end of the decade, by the end of 1999, this guy who has yet to fight Julio Cesar Chavez will have beaten Julio Cesar Chavez twice. He beats Miguel Angel Gonzalez, who was a former lightweight champ. Who's like right here, he's number 6 junior welterweight, 39-0. And he beats that top 4. He beats that top 4.
Well, except for Trinidad, of course.
No, Trinidad beats him. Right. Maybe he should have.
Well, yeah, he should have, because
Never mind the win. Never mind the win-loss. Okay, right? He fought them all. Now imagine this. Imagine Teofimo Lopez is Ring Magazine's top lightweight because he's the champion and he's got unified most of the belts.
Right.
And he kind of he proved himself against Lomachenko.
No question. Great performance.
He hasn't fought since then.
Well, and he's coming up in a couple
pandemic weeks. Is part of it. The pandemic is part of it. There's the, whatever the whole purse bid situation, the IBF mandatory, all this stuff. But my thing is, can you imagine? And Teofimo's got crazy talent, and he's also got a body where he's ready to go up to 140, maybe even 147, right?
No question.
But can you imagine if over the next 4 years, Teofimo Lopez fights like 1 or 2 of the top junior welterweights, and then takes on the top 4 welterweights? Can you imagine the buzz? Can you imagine the excitement? It's like,
well, within our community, yes, but again, for the mainstream, unfortunately,
but my thing is,
all these guys are.
But my thing is, you gotta fight. You gotta make these hardcore fan fights before it transcends to the casual fan, because it's not like Ike Quartey was a household name.
No,
and De La Hoya versus Ike Quartey wasn't like it wasn't a 1 million buy pay-per-view event. Maybe it did 600,000 or something like that. But the thing is by Oscar beating him, people, newspaper writers, they're writing about it. The hardcore fans are buzzing about it, so people hear about it, and they're like, "Oh, Oscar fought this unbeaten African dude." Oh, and then they see highlights of the fight. Oh, they knock each other down. Oh, Oscar rallies in the 12th round and knocks him down, and almost punches himself out. And it's like that leads to it. No, you're not gonna like Oscar De La Hoya versus Obakar is not going to be like that's not going to attract the attention of the casual fan. But by the time he gets up there, and when he fought Whitaker, that was a big deal because people knew who Whitaker was, right?
Sure.
But by the time he fights Felix Trinidad, it is a big deal.
Oh, it was a massive deal. Absolutely. It was a different environment even then. Yeah. I'm really excited. There's a book coming out. I'm sure you're aware of it, and I forget the author's name. It's coming out in November about how hip hop has changed the culture of boxing.
Oh, okay.
And I'm really excited to.
Oh, it's Hamilcar, right?
Probably, yeah.
Something I forgot what it was called. Beats, gosh.
But I really want to get in touch with the guy and have him on Word Balloon, because
you should.
Well, honestly, Doug, I wrote for Bert in Boxing Illustrated from the late 80s to the mid 90s. And that's when my radio career in sports talk radio happened here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I was able to continue to go to fights through 2006. And that's kind of where my career in broadcasting changed. Right. I was out of sports and just out of the picture for a while. And now doing, podcasting, and also the amount of video I've been doing really in the last in these pandemic months and everything. Yeah, it's reignited my interest in the sport, as I said.
Yeah, you took a break, so you're not like me, Steve Kim, like, oh my god, boxing. I'm sick of this. No, because honestly, like
shitty fights, as
Yeah. No, but even
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I love Teofimo Lopez. I mean, listen, he proved me
Great.
wrong. I thought Lomachenko was going to beat him.
So did I, man. But my
Okay.
God,
All right,
we
I don't feel
forced
so
him open.
stupid now.
Yes.
All right. So, but I mean, I like being wrong, man. It's like, I'm like, okay, I'm not betting on the stuff, and I'm not advising people to bet on my picks. So it's like whatever. But it's frustrating though, the fact that he hasn't fought. That it's been a whole year since he's fought, and what passes for news these days is like the rescheduling of this fight. I mean, this fight has literally been postponed and rescheduled at least 6 times.
Oh, I was going to say 3, but I'll believe you. If it's
way
6.
more than 3.
I
No,
believe you.
It's crazy.
I believe you. Yeah.
It's moved all around, and it's just like,
are they set now?
Only when they're fighting,
Are they set with this, mid
No.
October Brooklyn date?
No, I don't know what's happening. If it's
Because
happening
the
on
opponent,
Monday
yeah.
or if it's happening on the 16th.
Well,
But listen, I got to be honest with you. I stopped reading the story. I don't even want to, even the stories that appear on ringtv.com. Like, I don't care. I don't want to look at this. This is indicative of a broken system of this industry. So you asked me, has the ship sailed? Yeah, the ship has sailed, but it's not like it can't come back.
Okay.
It can't come back to the harbor, but two things have to change. The promoter can't be 100% exclusive to one platform. They need to have things in the contracts that allow for fighters, at least when they reach a certain point, to be able to fight on other platforms. Okay.
Yes.
It just that has to happen. And the promoters and the fighters have to get together and agree to do it more often.
Right.
Like, I know we're paying you a shitload of money, but you got to fight more than once every 9 months.
And be willing to, or at least I assume it's more the promoters than the fighters themselves, but be willing to potentially sacrifice that 0 on the loss side.
That's got to change.
You might have to, and that's why I respect Anthony Joshua, and I agree with Eddie Hearn, who always points out, you got to admit, AJ's willing to fight anybody, and he has fought everybody.
He has, and I like the way he handles the losses. Yes. He loses. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't throw shade. He was raised right. I hope like earlier in this interview, it didn't seem like I was putting him down by saying, oh, he thinks too much, or he's a thinker, or he's very calculating with his image. I mean, that's who he is. That's who he is, and I respect it. But what I respect even more of having a nice, clean image is being willing to fight the best out there and being willing to lose and try to come back. And listen, if it turns out that Usyk has his number, I don't care. I still want to see Joshua versus Fury, Joshua versus Wilder.
Sure.
There's a nice little round robin that can happen with UK heavyweights. I mean,
oh my God,
a rematch with Dillian White. You got Joe Joyce. You got Daniel Dubois. Maybe Dubois needs a little more seasoning, but he's almost there. And those out in England, those are all stadium fights, by the way.
Absolutely, and I love how the Brits love boxing. And in fact, I was talking to your buddies that are at ringside seat and saying that, isn't it amazing that, is it Boxing Weekly, the British publication that is a weekly?
Oh, yeah. That's over 100 years old.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. I want to ask
no, it's Boxing News.
Or pardon me, Boxing News.
Boxing News, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There was a Boxing Monthly that sadly went, or at least the print part of it, the print publication went belly up last year. But
okay.
Yeah. But good, yeah. The oldest, Ring is the oldest US boxing magazine.
Right.
Almost 100. We're getting there.
Yeah, when is the centennial?
Mid-February.
Next year. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, our 100th anniversary commemorative issue will be the issue after the next.
Wonderful.
That issue will be February 2022.
Okay, that's great, man.
We'll have a little bit of an early celebration, and
I hope we still have time to talk about some of these other matchups that are coming.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I know it's already like an hour because
forgive me, man. No, and I love what you're talking about. This is all great.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. Dylan White versus Otto Wallin. I like Otto's chances because the way he was able to bust up Tyson Fury, and as you know, if it wasn't a top ranked fight and Fury wasn't the top ranked champ, they would have stopped that fight on those cuts.
Yeah. No, that was gruesome. That was a nasty cut.
And I just think he's a tough, and he's not that small either.
No. He's tall, he's rangy. He's a southpaw. He's got good legs.
As you were describing Ali and Liston,
it's
kind of the same thing with Dylan White and Wallin, where Wallin is actually taller and maybe a little leaner.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, and it's so great to talk about some of these other international fighters beyond England and beyond the U.S., where it's like, hey, I know he's Swiss, and there isn't that big of a, I'm
but he's been in the U.S. for a while. He's been in the U.S. for a while. His English is great. And he's had a good teacher. He's had Joey Gamache. You remember Joey Gamache?
I love Joey Gamache. God, I was there at the Garden the night that they sacrificed him.
Yeah, Gotti. That was brutal.
And really, man, you were probably there as well.
Mm-hmm. I was.
There you go. So, no, and I mean, I was hanging out with Bert Sugar and Bud Schulberg, and we're all like, what the fuck, man? This is, I mean, who made this fight? Who made this junior lightweight against this junior middleweight and everything?
Yeah, it was ugly. Yeah,
and I love Joey. I'm so happy for him. I'm happy for him as a trainer. He's a great trainer.
Sure. No, I mean, he was a really good boxer, and fighters like him have a lot to impart. And it seems like Wallin is a good student. So,
agreed.
12 rounds with Tyson Fury, that goes a long way.
So agreed. Absolutely, man. And that's why, honestly, Doug, Bert Sugar is spitting in his grave because, prior to the openness now of sports book betting and everything, because we can do it now in Illinois. The last time I made a bet was prior to the two I made this year, was back when David Tuo fought Hasim Rahman.
Oh yeah.
And I bet on Rahman, and for 9 rounds I was a genius
until yeah.
But I bet against, and I mean, I love Manny Pacquiao, but I saw Ugas, and I really thought of them as fighters.
Good. Smart, yeah.
And I'm shocked that I got it right. And the same thing goes with Usyk and Joshua. And it wasn't until fight day that I'm like, man, it's still in my head that this could happen.
Yeah.
So I never bet the farm. I always bet token, literally $50. That's what I don't even bet $100. I'll bet $50. And
That's
it was fun, and it was great, and it was great to see Usyk win.
Yeah,
I still like Anthony Joshua a lot.
Me
you
too.
Never know what's going to happen. But in these subsequent fights that are coming up, I kind of think Fury still has Wilder's number. What do you think?
Yeah. How many times does he have to show us that he's the better boxer? How many times does he have to? He did it the first time, really? Like after a long layoff and 2 rather soft comeback fights, right? Basically public sparring sessions, losing a ton of weight, not being at 100%. He outboxed Wilder in that first fight. I'm sorry. He just outboxed him.
100%.
It should have been a draw. I get the draw because Wilder scored 2 knockdowns.
Yeah.
And we're in the United States. I mean, I'm sorry. Location counts, right? In the rematch, he showed that, and it's not like he just imposed himself physically, but he did do that. But he did it in a smart way. He did it technically and tactically. He was responsible. He kept Wilder at the end of the jab and gradually began to back Wilder up and catch him with punches and get him to the body. And then when he could get in close, he leaned on him and he put on weight. He did like the Emmanuel Stewart playbook for heavyweights. When Emmanuel Stewart got Lennox Lewis on his team and Vladimir Klitschko as rebuilding projects, right?
Right.
Like, you guys are big. You could put on weight, and I want you to get physical in there. When guys try to get outside of you, you hold them and you lean on them, and you weaken their legs and you wear them out. And that's exactly what Fury was doing to Deontay Wilder. So third fight, of course, Wilder has dynamite in his right hand.
Right.
He could catch him. But when we say a fighter has a puncher's chance, what we're really saying is that puncher has to get lucky. Because you got to if you're a smart fighter, if you know how to box, if you have experience, you got to do something really stupid to get caught. You got to do something stupid. The other guy's got to get lucky in that regard. And, for a lot of these guys, being in there with a puncher, makes them train hard. It makes them focus more. It puts them at their best. We've seen that obviously with Fury against Wilder, but Fury's buddy, Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders against a boxer, he trains half-assed. He looks like crap. His body looks like crap. He doesn't look like much. Billy Joe Saunders in there with somebody who can punch like David Lemieux, he's going to get his act together. He's going to be on point. And against Canelo, who can punch, who did catch him eventually, he was sharp. So I think in a way it's kind of good when you got these guys, because I don't think Fury was 100% for Otto Wallin. I think he was just like, hey, I'm fighting in Vegas. Sure. Who's this guy? All right.
Right. Right. He was expecting an easy tune-up. Yeah.
And it turned out to be a dramatic, difficult fight because of the cut and because Wallin was better than advertised. But for Wilder, obviously, he has to respect Wilder. He's got to respect that power. So he's going to be sharp. And I just feel like Fury can figure out how to win. He may not know himself until he gets in there and sees what Wilder is bringing to the table. Okay. Agreed. And then he's going to figure it out from there. He might stink it out. He might go 100% neutralizing. You know what I mean? He might turn into an octopus. He might touch and move. He might go southpaw. We don't know what he's going to do, but we do know this. He has a choice of ways to beat Wilder and to outclass Wilder. And he's a versatile boxer. It is what it is.
Man. No, and in fact, we talked about Foreman earlier. Foreman was able to trap Michael Moore and make him make a mistake and capitalize on that. Again, Wilder, they're talking about, it's going to be a different Wilder and stuff. I don't believe it. I think I think he is the fighter that he is.
Yeah, he has over 40 professional fights. He's in his mid-30s.
Right.
I know you can have a great camp with Malik Scott, and they have a rapport, and Malik Scott is a great guy, and he's got a brilliant boxing mind, and I know there's a lot of wisdom he can impart, and I'm sure he can show Wilder a lot of things. He could show Wilder how he would box, but Malik was a different kind of boxer. They're just different physically. Malik didn't have the power. Malik carries his weight in his legs, his thighs. He's got, a heavy lower body, whereas Wilder is kind of top heavy with a little spindly legs, but he's a live wire with a natural athlete with the power. And Malik was fundamentally sound. He was the slick boxer. He was the jab master. Malik was a great, but I don't know if that is how Wilder should box. Like in some ways, I felt that Wilder was served not being a really good boxer, like being kind of just like, this awkward puncher, a raw, awkward puncher who kind of bided his time and waited for his opening, lowered the boom.
Just like Charlie Goldman was with Marciano, working with what made Marciano great, rather than trying to transform Marciano.
Don't try to get him up on his toes. He's supposed to be flat-footed. Yep. He's a puncher.
Yep.
Make him strong.
Although again, if he couldn't take lessons from a guy like Mark Breland, I don't know who
Yeah. So I don't know, but I am interested to see how that works out in the corner, because I know right now it's great. They got that rapport going. They're in a safe space in camp. It's just him and Malik, and they're working the mitts and doing the drills and all that. It's different when he's face to face with Tyson Fury. And one thing I've noticed, even outside the ring, and I've been to a couple of press conferences and been around them, when they're just in each other's presence, not in the ring. Fury does something to Wilder. He gets his heart rate up. He bugs Wilder. Like Wilder gets really, really, whatever. Fury gets under Wilder's skin.
I'm with you.
And not in just like an irritating way. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about Caleb Plant making Canelo angry. You know what I mean? Like that's just literally just getting under your skin, just needling somebody, and then like, all right, asshole, I'm gonna really hurt you. It's different. It's like something about Fury. I don't want to say threatens, but almost like offends Wilder. I don't know what it is. It's just
interesting.
But I see it. I see it in his body language.
I believe you. Absolutely. A couple things, a couple other fights. where is Canelo's greatest challenge? Is it at light heavyweight? Is
Yeah.
it with Beterbiev and possibly Bivol and some of these others?
Well, listen, I'll say, Caleb Plant is no walk in the park. He's a really good boxer. He's as smart as Billy Joe Saunders, but a better athlete, a more of a natural super middleweight. So he's a big guy. Okay. Good footwork, good speed, good jab, lateral movement. He's a really good boxer. Okay. But I'm going to say it's not like Canelo hasn't seen that style. Canelo's seen every style.
Right.
I don't know if Plant has enough on his punches to keep Canelo honest. And quite frankly, even if he was a world-class puncher, Canelo deals with it. He's not easy to hit. And if you do get him, he's got a pretty good shin.
Yes.
And he's got that mentality where you hit me, I'll hit you back. As a matter of fact, I'm ready to hit you 2 and 3 times. I'll make you miss and hit you 2 or 3 times, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna get to that rib cage too. He's a body snatcher. So I do expect Canelo to get past Plant, but I do think Plant is a worthy challenge for the Mexican star. I think a really good fight, and it's basically against a light heavyweight, but they would still be fighting at 168, is either David Benavidez, I don't even know how David Benavidez makes 168. I think it's because he's young. He's a young guy. I think he's not even 25. But David Benavidez, because he is aggressive. He's going to fight like a big man against Canelo. And we haven't seen that. We haven't seen anybody with the balls to do it. And I think Benavidez has balls. He's got pride. He's going to go in there and he's going to fight a Mexican fighter like a Mexican. He's Mexican-American, but he's got that culture, right?
Sure.
He's going to bring it.
Just like
I don't know what's going to happen, but that'll be fun. That'll be fun just seeing a tear up, right? And then there's Dimitri Bivol. And Bivol is a title holder at 175 pounds light heavyweight. But he says he can make 168. So if they were to make that fight at 168, Canelo would get some hate for having a light heavyweight come down. But this is a light heavyweight who has been talking about fighting at super middleweight for a number of years. So whatever, but wherever, I think Bivol will be difficult. And then of course, Artur Beterbiev, who is a grinder. And he's also a guy who will fight like the bigger man.
Right.
And he has that extensive Russian amateur background. And he's a technician and methodical, like I'm Rocky Marciano, but heavy handed. And he looks the part. He looks tough as nails. So.
Well, I think a lot of the Eastern Europeans, and back to AJ, I think they have an advantage because they started earlier. And I think that's why Ruiz was able to beat AJ as well. Yeah. Because
he started earlier, more amateur background.
Yeah. And also AJ, like we said, has to think about strategy. Whereas these other
muscle memory, right?
Exactly. Muscle memory that they've had since they were little kids.
These boxers who started at 7 years old, absolutely, man. It's in there. They don't have to think about it.
Right.
Their body does it. They're like, left hook, counter right.
What do you think of another heavyweight matchup that's coming up? Chisora and Joe Parker.
You know what? I saw that fight. Why are they doing it again? I mean, it wasn't a bad fight, but it wasn't a great fight. It wasn't a good fight. I'm going to be honest with you. That's one of those fights. I'm watching on my laptop. I'm watching on DAZN. Yeah. So it's in the afternoon because it's coming from the UK.
Yeah.
And I was scoring it for like 4 or 5 rounds, and I'm like, why am I scoring this? What am I sick? What am I doing this for? Because what happened was, I think after like 3 or 4 rounds, Parker was looking tired, was looking sluggish, looking kind of sloppy, and Chisora he looked a little bit heavy, and he looked kind of sloppy, and I'm just like, I was kind of like, these heavyweights, man, what the hell, man? Like, you guys, like, all of the top pro fighters have strength and conditioning coaches, and they got nutritionists, and they do all these like CrossFit type drills these days. They got the heavy ropes, and they got the footwork drills where it looks like there's like a chain link, like a ladder on the ground, and they're going in and out like football players. And they do all this and they're squatting crazy weight. I'm seeing like 3 or 4 plates and they're doing their squats and they're doing stuff to their abs where everybody, I mean, they got their abs. I'm like, wow, this generation of boxers must have the strongest core and the strongest quads of any generation of prize fighters.
I think you're
But
right.
they get in the ring and they're out of gas after 4 rounds.
Yes.
The technique falls off. It was weird. I know I was thinking like an old man. I was sounding like an old man to myself. But I'm watching Chisora Parker and I'm like, you slobs. I'm thinking like, you know what? 205-pound Evander Holyfield wipes his ass with both of you.
I agree.
I'm thinking, just wipes his ass with you, you know, and whatever. That's just getting old, getting cynical, I guess.
Well, all right. Well, here's another old man.
That rematch, I may not watch that one live. I'm going to be real with you.
I'm hip. It's cool. All right. Another thing, and let's just get it over with. The YouTubers that are fighting, the celebrity boxing that's going on.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's telling that apart from 42-year-old Manny Pacquiao fighting a late sub in Yordenis Ugas, so far the most significant pay-per-view events this year have involved a Paul brother.
Right.
There was Floyd Mayweather fighting Logan Paul. And it seemed like Logan Paul was kind of carrying that promotion. And then Jake Paul against Tyron Woodley.
Yeah.
And I watched them both. And was I entertained? With Mayweather Logan? I wasn't that entertained just because it was bizarre. Logan was so much bigger. And Floyd didn't look like he really trained, or just maybe his body's gotten old to where he's not going to look svelte, you know, his muscles aren't going to be as tight as they once were. But I was also thinking, okay, Mayweather's carrying him, and do I need to see this? You know, I don't know. I didn't mind like Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr.
That was an entertaining exhibition
and taking it easy. Like I was cool with that because they're on the same level, and
yes,
that's all good, right? And Tyson is a heavyweight, and Roy isn't. And yeah, you should pull up on your punches a little bit. We don't want to see anybody get hurt, right?
Right.
So that was fine, and I enjoyed that, and it was entertaining. I didn't enjoy Mayweather Logan, but I did. I watched with a group of people. I went to somebody's house. So it was like a pay-per-view party, and we had pizza and beer and chicken wings and all that. And we just kind of had fun. Like we were kind of making fun of it as it was happening. You know what I mean? The Woodley Logan fight.
Okay.
So whatever. I enjoyed it. I watched it. It didn't mean anything. I didn't. You know, I wasn't writing a report on it. I kind of admire the Logan brothers because they really are training. And
I agree with that. Absolutely.
You know, listen, they're not fighting real boxers, but they're fighting athletes. They're fighting guys who have punched people in the face.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't start off that way. They were fighting other whatever,
YouTubers
content
or whatever,
providers, YouTubers, whatever you want to call them. Yeah.
KSL and all that bullshit.
Yeah. Modern celebrities, right? And they kind of advanced, and they're challenging themselves. And it seems to me like doing that, like training with real fighters and trainers and sparring and doing the whole thing and disciplining themselves and whatever, getting over whatever nerves they have. And they handle themselves pretty well. So they're definitely used to fame and pressure. But it's a different kind of pressure walking up and, into that ring. It seems to have made them better people. Because I used to hear, I've got 2 daughters. I got 2 teenage daughters, and they can't stand the Paul brothers. They think they're dirtbags, you know. Yeah. And they tell me a lot of yucky stuff about them, but it doesn't seem like they're like that anymore. You know, maybe they're just getting older and they've matured. But I kind of think boxing has something to do with it. And I do kind of like that these guys are, you know, they've got their millions of subscribers and their dedicated fan base, and if they want to settle a beef or do something that's like, you know, aggressive or sports like, they could have done pro wrestling. They could have done MMA. They could have played Fortnite, you know. They didn't have to actually be physical. you know, like they chose boxing, and I kind of like, oh, so boxing is still part of American culture, you know, and it is, obviously, you know this, it is, you know, you're a pop culture expert, you know, boxing's influence just permeates our society,
Of course.
you know what I mean? And I kind of dig it. I kind of like that, you know, these two white guys from Ohio are like, no, we want to be boxers. You know, we look up to boxers. They're not that, but they want to try to be that. And they're willing to take real punches. So kind of like, hey, you know.
That's the most positive description of the Paul brothers, and I respect that. Yeah. I guess what bothers me is, and especially when I think back again to the 90s, and Mickey Rourke was messing around with boxing.
I remember
doing his fights. We never took it seriously. And also, I don't like the blurring of their promotions where it's somewhere between an exhibition and a real fight.
Yeah.
And I don't like that because when Ali fought Inoki back in the 70s, we knew what it was.
Yes.
And I think there was a clear delineation.
We're more desperate now. We're more desperate for stars. We're more desperate for dollars. You know, we're more, you know, and I get it, you know, with like, you know, Showtime it was Showtime that did Mayweather Logan.
Right.
And
both right. Did they do
Jake versus Tyron. Right. And I'm like, you know, between these pay-per-view, if you want to call it a circus, call it a circus. They've given us good boxing programming this year. Like they gave us Jermell Charlo, Brian Castano on regular Showtime. Like that was a unified. That was
that's a real fight.
Yeah, for the undisputed junior middleweight championship. Now ended in so we didn't get a champion, but still, it was the two best junior middleweights fighting each other, and it wasn't pay-per-view. Okay,
right.
They're in the process of unifying the junior featherweight division, and that's just for hardcore. They don't get great ratings for that. That's just for the hardcore nutcakes like myself.
Well,
I'm going to be watching, you know. So
it's smart programming though, because it's competitive. That's why I loved the Muhammad Ali championships. That's where obviously Usyk was able to unify the
the World Boxing Super Series, right,
and the Bantamweight series in those fights. They were great, and it's smart programming because the fighters needed it for exposure.
Yes,
the network needed it for quality programming and stuff.
Right.
So that's great, and those are win-wins. And I really think DAZN, Top Rank, and PBC have had their moments of great matchups, and spectacular fights, and that's why I'm re-energized with my interest and love for the sport.
Right. So I mean, my point on the Paul brothers and those pay-per-views, if that puts money into Showtime's coffers, which enables them to do like junior featherweight unification bouts, right? Like Stephen Fulton versus Brandon Figueroa. Okay, you know what I mean? I'll take the weird with the good. You know, I'll accept it, and I don't think it can last much longer. I mean, at some point,
I agree.
You know, they're going to get a concussion and like sparring and be like, you know what? Nah, you know.
Or we lucked out with Evander, and thank God he didn't get hurt. And that was really scary to watch.
Yeah, but at some point, there's going to be a public outcry to where even some of these weak commissions are going to be like, no, we're not going to have former fighters, you know, guys that haven't fought in like 15 years, you know, fighting real bouts or even exhibitions. We're not going to, you know.
I hope so.
In which case, I wouldn't, and this might happen. An outfit like Triller might just kind of, okay, we're going to become, you know, we're just going to we're going to sort of steer away from celebrity boxing, and we're going to be more about just boxing, but we're going to deliver it in our sensational way with rappers and concerts, that kind of thing.
I don't mind the variety show we get with the Triller card. That doesn't bother me.
Same thing.
That's why I want to talk to Todd Snyder. Here's the title, everybody.
Beatboxing. That was it. Yeah. And Todd Snyder. And he did the Hamilcar Publications book on Drew Bundini Brown.
Oh, wow.
Called Don't Believe the Hype.
Yeah.
Which is really good. Highly recommend.
I'm going to have to read that as well. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
But I wouldn't be surprised if the Logan brothers, or at least I'm talking about the Paul brothers. If Jake Paul goes into promotion, because he just signed Amanda Serrano, and I don't know if I think that's as a promoter.
Wow.
And one thing he did on that card that took place in Cleveland, they did like 17,000, which is pretty good. He gave up like $1 million of his purse and just fortified the purses of the undercard fighters.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, all right, he can't be all bad. No, I like that. I like it.
This is the most positive things I've heard about the Paul brothers, and it does make me kind of back off.
There we go. So you started this podcast off being glass half full, and I'm gonna end it being glass half full. That's the way to be.
No, I hear you, Doug. Absolutely, man. And truly, I'm so glad that the ring is as strong as it's ever been, and under your stewardship. And I really do enjoy reading it every month, or and when it comes out. And
comes out every month.
There you go, man. And
I'm feeling it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no,
by the end of the year, you start to feel this grind, like, oh my God, another cycle. Oh crap, yeah.
But it really, I mean, there really are great fights on the horizon, and I think that's really exciting. And I'm glad to see it. And also, there seems to be a little more occasional, and maybe because of purse bids or whatever, but seeing Terrence Crawford now, going to fight Sean Porter.
That's the one I'm looking forward to. That's a fight I'm going to travel to. I want to be at that one. I want to absorb that atmosphere, and I want to see two, master veterans at work, because that's an interesting matchup.
It is an interesting matchup. I still think, obviously, Crawford, I think, has the advantage.
Me too.
I thought Ugas won that Porter fight that he had.
You're not alone.
I know.
You're not
alone. I
alone.
realize that. And then I think that's one of the reasons why when they announced Ugas Pacquiao, I'm like, wait a minute, And but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Sean, as good as he is, and there's a lot of talent at 147 that is denied facing each other because of the silos of the promoters and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the best.
But in terms of who they fought at welterweight, Porter's the battle-tested guy. He's been in the variety of styles and the real, truly world-class welterweights. He's been tested in there. He hasn't taken any shortcuts. We need more fighters like Sean Porter.
I hear you, and I agree.
Like, he's not worried. He's not thinking about an undefeated record.
Is there a division that we haven't mentioned that you think? I mean, obviously the lightweights are doing great with.
Well, I love the junior bantamweights. I still the only fight that I traveled to this year was the rematch between Juan Francisco Estrada and Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, and that was in Texas. That was an Eddie Hearn matchroom fight card, and to me, that's still, even though I thought the wrong guy won, that's still fight of the year.
Okay.
Yeah. His boxing. And are you supposed to fight again before the end of the year?
Are you calling any fights soon?
Am I calling any fights soon? Just locally, Thompson Boxing. That's they're the club promoters, but they know how to develop fighters. They had a guy that headlined the last edition of Showbox, and he took on an undefeated prospect that everybody was like, "Oh, watch this guy." And the Thompson Boxing fighter knocked him out in one round. So they do that. They know how to develop talent. They developed Tim Bradley. They developed Josecito Lopez. They developed, speaking of the junior featherweight division, they developed, what's the kid's name? Danny Roman. Danny Roman, who'd had 2 titles at 122 pounds and still a player in the division. They know how to build fighters. From the club level all the way up to the world-class championship level. So, I think they got a show the 22nd that I'll be doing. I'm looking forward to.
Oh, that's great, man. Will it stream anywhere now?
They stream. Yeah, you just go to ThompsonBoxing.com or go to their Facebook page or go to their YouTube channel, and it's a club show, but you never know who's gonna advance from that club level to like being a legit prospect to a legit contender to a world champion.
Are you intrigued enough to watch Boxer with 2 X's work with Sky Sports this weekend and the card they're going to do this weekend?
I'm probably not going to watch it live, but if I hear, I check it all out. Yeah, but, I'm glad, Hearn left Sky with the exception of Anthony Joshua fights, and I'm glad they're filling the void. I'm glad they just didn't say goodbye to boxing.
100%, man. God.
Let's see what what the new kids do.
Yeah, I understand why HBO got out of the live boxing business. I'm glad Showtime is still in it.
Same here.
Man, I'll tell you, I miss the level of coverage and the way they approached their
production.
Coverage.
Yeah, their production value was second to none.
No. Yeah. I mean, you and I grew up on it, for God's sake.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Good.
It was a big shock when they got out of the business. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
43 years or whatever it was, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And they had like 3 amazing decades, like literally like 80s, 90s, 2000s. And, I was ringside for all those huge fights in the 2000s. And it was just, they knew how to help make big time boxing, but also present big time boxing to both the hardcore audience and the casual fans.
And explain why an unknown name was important to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and again, that's Merchant and Ross Greenberg and all the guys at HBO over the years.
Hey, don't forget Lou DiBella before DiBella got on his own as a promoter.
Absolutely.
He was a big part of the success of HBO sports boxing programming during the 90s. And that's
absolutely right.
He understood boxing and matchmaking. He could, he understood, how fighters match up in the ring and what's going to make for a satisfying fight. If not just intriguing stylistically, then just what's going to make for a bloody war. And he also was really good at spotting talent, and saying, okay, Sugar Shane Mosley, yeah, we can build you up into somebody who's going to be a player with the guys who are superstars right now.
No question.
On different levels. Like Shane was like elite level prospect, but then he also did it with like, who's the guy who used to El Diablo, Angel Manfredi.
Oh, sure.
Like,
another Indiana guy.
Yeah, another Indiana guy, right. Just build him up. And he became a B-side who actually beat Arturo Gatti. You know what I mean? Like, and beat Ivan Robinson. So he had his nights where he just was not able to win the world title, but he was entertaining.
Well, and
built him up to that.
He and Mayweather had their unified 130 or 35.
That's Mayweather. That's the real Floyd Mayweather right there. Getting rid of him in 2 rounds. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was Floyd at his best. No, you're right.
Fun times. Yeah.
You're killing me, man. This was great. Hey, you're welcome back anytime.
Anytime. Yeah. Let's definitely before the Crawford Porter fight.
That would be amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's so great to see you, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I really like talking to writers more so than promoters, and more so even than sometimes the fighters themselves. No disrespect intended, but I really I miss this level of analysis, and without any biases, to be able to speak candidly and look at these matchups and get an interesting conversation going. So that's what I try to do in my small way with Word Balloon. And as I said, I want to talk to Todd Snyder. I want to talk to Stradley about his new Hagler Hearns book.
Oh yeah, I got it right over here.
Do you really? That's great. Here, yeah, by all means, show it.
There we go. There it is. The War.
Boom. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, again, I really have I've always had a lot of respect for writers, and it was always great to, in my small way, when I worked for Boxing Illustrated, provide commentary for the agate, each state, what's going on. Yeah. I was one of those guys covering the Midwest back in the mid 90s and stuff. So,
and fans like me relied on that. There was no internet. So
absolutely, man. No. Well, seriously, we're going to wrap up, but everybody that was watching, thank you very much. Nice comments from everybody. And we'll open things up. Stradley's probably going to be my next Big Bout guest to talk about.
Please give him my regards.
Absolutely, yeah. I will, man. No, those guys, like I said, man. No, Mike Cronenberg and Stradley and Metloff, they're all man. It's mutual admiration. So
there we go. We didn't get a chance to talk comic books, but I think
talk to me.
Doesn't Cronenberg? Doesn't he?
Yes.
Doesn't he design these covers?
Yes, he does.
As well as the boxing magazine. Yeah.
Yes, and Doug, I feel bad that we did monopolize with 100% boxing.
Yeah. So
Anytime you
next
wanna
time we'll talk comics. Yeah, we'll definitely talk comics.
Okay, good. That's great to hear. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Enjoy your weekend. More great word balloon coming on the comics side. Starting on Tuesday night, I'm talking to JM DeMatteis. And we're going to be talking about some of his new
writers. Yeah.
Wednesday, Scott Snyder is going to join us, and Scott is going to be talking about a lot of his creator-owned stuff. So that's all coming up next week on Word Balloon Live. Until then,